Several days had passed in the coastal city of Valamareth. Lydia had made some progress with the mechanical arm. Although it was still unfamiliar, she was beginning to understand its movements. Opening and closing the hand still required considerable effort, and focusing her magic to do so felt awkward and unnatural. She also struggled to move each finger independently. No matter how hard she tried, two or more fingers often moved together instead of individually. The motions remained stiff and uncertain, but with each passing day she gained a little more control. Jack watched quietly as she completed another simple exercise before fastening the leather strap around her wrist. "That's enough for today." Lydia looked at him. "It still feels awkward. Like it isn't really my arm." Jack nodded. "It will for some time. Focusing your magic through it isn't something you'll master overnight." She glanced down at the mechanical hand. "I still can't move each finger on its own." Jack smiled faintly. "That will take some time. So stay focused and keep practicing." Lydia gave a small nod. "I will." A short while later, he stood beside Henrik outside the inn. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt through the narrow streets, as merchants packed away their stalls as evening slowly settled over Valamareth. Jack adjusted his coat before looking at Henrik. "Well, we'll be returning. You'll take care of Goran and the other men who are joining us." Henrik nodded without hesitation. "Yes, of course." Jack looked back toward the entrance of the inn, where Lydia was waiting with the few belongings she now owned. With Lydia having received her arm, she's already started practicing. So we'll be taking our leave. I'll see you back in Brasken." Henrik extended his hand. "Safe travels, then." The two men shook hands. Jack gave one last nod before he and Lydia climbed aboard the waiting carriage. Within moments, the horses pulled away from the inn, disappearing into the evening traffic as they began the long journey home. On the other side of the border, within the Kadrissar Empire, the city of Brasken remained as busy as ever. Even as dusk settled across the streets, countless businesses continued their trade beneath rows of oil lamps that slowly flickered to life throughout the city. Inside one of the Empire's discreet buildings, Thomas Harlow sat across from Geshny and Darian. Several reports lay neatly arranged before him. He looked at the pair. "Have your tasks been completed?" Geshny answered first. "Yes." "Good." Thomas folded his hands together. "As for the rest, we're waiting for the boss. My informants have confirmed that the crime families have already begun printing the notes, and, as expected, they've started exchanging those notes for gold, silver, and bronze coins. The collection process is already underway. So, for now, everything is proceeding according to plan." Silence lingered for a moment. Then Geshny spoke. "Out of curiosity," Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Yes." She leaned forward slightly. "I still don't entirely agree with your methods. It's just—" She hesitated. Thomas gave a faint grin. "What? You don't like me?" He leaned back in his chair. "Let's be honest. You might not like me, but I get things done, and I have ways of getting things done that the rest of you simply don't." He studied her for a moment. "Anything else?" Geshny held his gaze before shaking her head. "No, nothing." Thomas nodded. "Good. Then here's something interesting for the two of you. Apparently, certain members of the crime families have someone inside the police. It's nothing to concern yourselves with for the moment. I've already looked into it, and according to the information I've gathered, they still know nothing about us." He paused.
But don't you think it would be worthwhile to discover exactly who that informant is? When the time comes, we'll deal with it. But for now, I want the two of you to look into something else. My informants recently uncovered something rather interesting. It seems the crime families don't keep all their gold and silver inside the Kadrissar Empire. They maintain a fail-safe. If something goes wrong and they're forced to flee, they'll still have assets waiting for them somewhere beyond the border. He tapped one of the reports. What we don't know is where those assets are being kept or how they're being moved. I doubt they're connected to the owners under their real names. They're probably hidden behind false identities or stored inside businesses or properties they secretly control. He looked at Geshny and Darian. I want the two of you to investigate that. I'll assign a few more men to assist you. And while you're doing that, find out how they transport their wealth. Understanding how they move their wealth will prove very useful to us. Thomas walked toward the window. Outside, the last traces of sunset had disappeared, leaving Brascan illuminated by countless lanterns stretching into the distance. He looked outside for a moment before turning back. I have a feeling the information we've gathered will prove quite useful for making a few adjustments to the plan. After all, the boss should be returning within the next few days. So, the two of you should begin investigating immediately. As for the rest, you may leave. Geshny and Darian both nodded. Understood. They turned and headed for the door. Just before Geshny stepped through it, Thomas spoke again. One more thing. She stopped and looked back. I'm sorry about your sister. And keep this in mind. It was never my intention. What happened was never directed at you. Geshny silently nodded before leaving the room alongside Darian. The door quietly closed behind them. Thomas remained standing by the window. The night had fully settled over Brascan, and countless lanterns glowed from homes and businesses across the city. After a long moment, he returned to the table and looked down at the reports before him. This information will prove quite useful for the boss when he returns.
Meanwhile, far away, within Conquerdine, night had fully settled. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows of polished stone as elegant brass lanterns and dozens of candles bathed a private chamber deep within the royal palace in a warm golden glow. The polished wooden floor was partially covered by thick, richly woven carpets, while finely crafted bookshelves, polished cabinets, and ornate furnishings reflected the wealth and prestige of the royal family. A young prince sat at a large wooden desk. Several maps lay spread out before him. His expression remained thoughtful as he studied the reports that had been delivered throughout the day. A quiet knock echoed against the chamber door. He looked up. Enter. The heavy door slowly opened. An elderly man stepped inside. Though advanced in years, he remained physically well built, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who had spent much of his life as a soldier. The prince looked at him. "Walter, you may take a seat." Walter gave a respectful nod before taking the chair opposite the prince's desk. The prince folded his hands. "Well, I take it Jack White has sent someone to collect the men we gathered for him." Walter nodded. "Yes, he has." The prince gave a slight nod. "It's a good thing you and your men uncovered that little problem with House de Montclair." Walter rested one arm on the chair. "Yes, it is. But I take it you've already decided to eliminate the problem." The prince nodded without hesitation. "Yes.
My grandfather always used to say, "Never be afraid to take action as soon as possible. If you hesitate, it can cost you everything." Walter smiled faintly. "That is true, but sometimes you also need to think things through before taking action. I understand the circumstances, and I know you've thought this through." He paused briefly. "There is another matter I discovered." The prince looked at him. "Let me guess. Someone tried to poison my father." Slowly. Walter's eyes narrowed slightly before he nodded. "You guessed correctly. Did you manage to interrogate the person responsible?" Walter slowly shook his head. "No, we couldn't question them before they took their own lives." The prince nodded calmly. "I expected as much. I already know, to a certain extent, who was involved." Walter frowned. "You do?" The prince nodded. "I never informed House de Montclair about my father's illness, and yet they appeared. They immediately began trying to secure their own positions. My informants also reported that they had already begun discussing how to increase their influence." He sighed quietly. "That may be my father's greatest weakness. He has always been too tolerant. When people crossed him, there were rarely serious consequences. He ruled with too gentle a hand."
The room fell silent. Finally, the prince spoke again. "Walter, I've already made certain arrangements regarding the 2 members of House de Montclair who may have been responsible for all of this. They'll be dealt with appropriately. But I don't want our attention focused solely on them. I want your men to begin looking into the rest of House de Montclair, not just a few individuals, the entire house. But not openly. I want them to observe quietly. No one is to know they're being watched. I want to know where their true loyalties lie." Walter nodded. "I'll assign some of my most trusted men. They'll remain unnoticed, and every report will come directly to me." The prince gave a slight nod. "Good. I don't want anyone disturbed. I simply want information. Who they meet, who they speak with, what values they hold. A man's values often reveal where his true loyalty lies." Walter nodded once more. "It will be done." He paused. "Anything else?" The prince leaned back in his chair. "Whether my plan with Jack White succeeds or fails, there are still certain matters that must be dealt with. If my plan succeeds, I'll still have some house cleaning to do. So we need to be prepared." He looked down at one of the reports. "I also want constant updates regarding my father's health, how quickly he's recovering, or if he's growing weaker." Walter remained silent. The prince continued. "If my father dies, the Cadrissa Empire may see it as the perfect opportunity. There are members of my own family who would gladly fight one another for the throne, and the Cadrissa Empire would almost certainly support one of them. We need to know which one." Walter nodded thoughtfully. "And if we discover who it is?" The prince was quiet for a moment. "If necessary, we remove them. If not, we gather as much information as possible. They may become useful later." He suddenly smiled. "Actually, I think we need to spring a trap for them." Walter raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" The prince folded his hands. "Someone within this palace leaked information about my father's condition. So we'll put the plan in motion tomorrow." Walter smiled faintly. "A clever trap." The prince smiled. "Well, I have a plan that might work. It serves 2 purposes. It may confuse them,
and at the same time, it may reveal who is leaking information to them. He looked at Walter. You know, giving them information that misleads them might actually be a good thing. After all, if they can interfere in our affairs, why can't we do the same to them? I don't believe the person who poisoned my father was the only one passing information to the Khadrisar Empire. There are almost certainly others. So, I think we should begin telling different stories. One will hear that my father is recovering, another that his condition is growing worse, and another that my sister may soon marry a powerful prince from a neighboring kingdom. If all of that information reaches them, they won't know what to believe. They'll waste precious time trying to determine which report is true. He smiled faintly, and confusion may buy us the time we need. Who knows what we might uncover while they're trying to piece everything together? Walter considered the idea for a moment before nodding. I think you're right. If they're chasing conflicting reports, they'll be reacting instead of planning. The prince gave a slight nod. Exactly. Moonlight stretched across the palace gardens below. If there are rival factions within our own family, I find it difficult to believe the Khadrisar Empire is any different. They must have ambitious nobles, powerful families, men competing for influence. He turned back toward Walter. I want you to quietly discover everything you can about them. If they can interfere in our affairs, then perhaps we can interfere in theirs. Walter smiled. I'll begin immediately. The prince slowly nodded. But first, you were right. Sometimes you need to think things through. I need to find a way to accomplish both, to expose the traitors within our own kingdom, and to encourage divisions within the Khadrisar Empire. Walter stood. I'll return tomorrow. The prince gave a slight nod. I'll be ready. The prince slowly rose from his chair. Before you go, out of curiosity, why did you choose Goran above everyone else? Walter smiled faintly. Let's put it this way. If you need a warrior who is always in control of himself, he's the perfect man. The prince tilted his head slightly. What do you mean exactly? Walter folded his arms. I take it you've heard the stories about the Dragon of Disaster. The prince nodded. Yes. Walter looked directly at him. Goran killed that dragon, single-handedly. The prince's eyes widened. But every report I read said it was a group of men. Walter slowly shook his head. I was there that night. When we arrived, the dragon was already dead.
The prince looked back at Walter. Well, I suppose you can go now without me asking you any more questions. I'll see you tomorrow. Walter nodded. Yes. The prince smiled faintly. You know, you can actually call me by my actual name, Alaric von Falkenwall. There's no need to address me as Prince all the time. Walter gave a small smile. Perhaps, but I've grown used to the formality. After all, that's what everyone else calls you. The prince chuckled quietly. Well, for Jack White and O'Reilly, I let them continue calling me that. It helps. It keeps things simple. It reminds them who I am without me accidentally saying my own name. He turned his attention back toward the moonlit sky beyond the palace windows. Well, I suppose that's everything for tonight. Walter rose from his chair. I'll see you tomorrow. The prince gave a slight nod. Until tomorrow. Walter quietly left the chamber, leaving Alaric alone with his thoughts. A few days later, Jack White and Lydia arrived back in Brascan. Waiting for them at the train station were Geshny, Darian, and Thomas Harlow.
As Jack stepped down from the train, the three greeted him. He looked at them. "So, I take it everything went according to plan." Thomas Harlow nodded. "Yes. Geshny and Darien managed to find several properties. They also found the boat you requested. But there are a few other matters I'd like to discuss with you." He glanced toward Geshny. "I must say, Geshny has quite a unique taste when it comes to property. She managed to find a few rather interesting places. I believe they'll live up to your expectations." After making their way through the busy streets of Brascan, they eventually arrived at one of the buildings. Upstairs, several rooms had already been furnished. A desk stood in what appeared to be an office. Several chairs had been arranged nearby, while the remaining rooms contained the basic furniture needed to begin living there. Jack looked around. "Well, good job." Thomas gave a slight smile. "The credit should go to Geshny. As for the other matters, I've managed to uncover a few things." Jack nodded. "Good." He turned toward Lydia. "Go choose a room for yourself." She nodded quietly. Jack then looked at Geshny. "Help her get whatever she needs for her room, but don't spoil her. I don't want her becoming spoiled." Geshny smiled faintly before nodding. "As you wish." She and Lydia walked off together. Jack then looked toward Darien. "I want you to make a few inquiries around town. See if you can find a reliable doctor, one who knows how to keep his mouth shut. You know, the sort who occasionally works for certain people." Darien nodded. "As you wish."